Hey guys, and thank you for tuning into this video. First and foremost, I want to make a few things clear before we even get started and make sure this is the right video for you. Uh, some of you who are watching are going to be people who this video was intended for, people who are in a very specific group or collection of individuals who are looking to start collection agencies and who have already made contact with me. You might already be in the Slack group, but I'm sure a few of you are going to stumble across this video just because you're looking to get into debt collections and there's not a whole lot of information about it online. Maybe you stumbled across the Steemit article, How to Become a Debt Buyer, a Beginner's Guide. That's an article that I wrote for the DBA back when it was still called the DBA. They ended up not publishing it. I didn't go up there that year. And it seems to have gotten a lot of exposure, being some of the only information there is online about debt buying. So whenever someone reaches out to me, I direct them to my Slack group. And then the Slack group is a good place for us to all get together and talk about things so that I'm not answering the same questions over and over. I can sort of talk to everybody all at once. We have these weekly Google Hangouts groups set up, and right after this video is finished, we're going to be hopping, together into a group to discuss this. Anyways, there's a couple things I want to go over with you guys. I made a bit of an outline. I took some of the topics or questions that people have been asking me about, and I made a bit of an outline which really just serves as some of the basic information, some of the simple top-level information. But what I want to do is I want to get everything in this one video right here laid out in a nice clean outline so that any subsequent videos that I make can be more of a deep dive into any one particular topic. Now also, if you are in the Slack group and if you just clicked on a link to this video, what I would like to do is I'd like to apologize in advance. I know that I've sort of been stringing you guys along this week. I apologize. This has been one of the absolute busiest weeks of my life. I've worked nonstop all through last weekend, all through this past week, more hours than I care to mention, more stress than I care to mention, and all day yesterday. Now, today's Sunday. It's already halfway through the day. I'm over on the East Coast. It's going on 4 p.m., and I really haven't had a chance to relax yet. I'm trying to avoid burnout, so I'm going to blast through this video. We'll hop on Google Hangouts for a little bit, and then I really got to sign off so I can work on my software a little bit and try to relax a little bit before work starts tomorrow. So anyways, if you want to start a collection agency and you don't know where to start, here's a quick outline for you. Keep in mind, anything in this outline, especially the things that are bolded, are going to have their own separate deep dives in subsequent videos. And again, I apologize in advance for any of you who have been waiting to speak with me and who I've been a little bit too busy to stay in touch with recently, or this past week. So let's just jump into it. So the reasons to get into a collection agency or debt buying, and I'm not trying to be facetious here, but everyone has the same goal. It's to make money. And, for the people who are into it for passive income, that's an entirely different conversation. It's not as easy as you think to create passive income this way, at least not unless you have a lot of money to play with. But anyways, that's a completely different topic for a completely different day. I'm not really going to get too deep into that right now. So there's agencies, and that would be people who buy, service, or do both. You might buy debt. You might service accounts for a third-party agency, a third-party debt buyer, a first-party creditor, or like my agency, for example, I do both. I'm going to actually jump down here real quick. For any of you who don't already know me, how I got my start, I always wanted a desk job when I was younger. My father worked in an office. He had a sales job. He was really good at it. He did pretty well for himself. So I got this idea that working in an office meant making good money. And I just thought it was so cool to wear a nice button down and a tie in to work every day. Back then it was before people carried laptops around, but the men always had their briefcases. I just thought that was the coolest work environment. I always wanted to work there. So when I turned 18 years old, after I worked, my restaurant and dry cleaning jobs and all that stuff you do as a teenager, I wanted a desk job, so I applied to be a debt collector. And it was actually somebody at a restaurant that I used to work at told me a little bit about when he worked in collections. He really glorified the job and said it's mostly just older people. They buy cars for their grandchildren, and then they forget to make the payments, and you just got to call them, remind them to make the payments, and you get these nice big bonus checks. Granted, this was back in probably the 80s, and maybe it was more like that in the 80s. Collections has really changed a bit, especially with the internet being as predominant as it is. The industry has changed quite a bit since then. Everyone seems to think that they're attorneys these days. It's a bit frustrating to be a debt collector and during the age of information when everybody thinks they know everything. But anyways, there is still money in it. There's a bit of a stigma to the industry, and we'll talk about that as well in a future video. But that's a little bit about my history. I was 18. I got into the collection industry. I did it for years. I just happened to be good at it. I was never as good at the negotiating process as some of my fellow debt collectors, but I was really good at the, I guess you could say, the IT side of things. So the agencies that I would work for, I would always inevitably end up with jobs where I managed their phone systems. I would manage their dialers. I would set up websites and emails. I would help them with their databases. And in the process, I would find ways to make money for myself. What that generally meant is, let's say, for example, I was working at an agency and the agency didn't run a dialer. I would have my accounts that were assigned to me in my queue. I would export the accounts and I would load them into my own dialer that I created and paid for out of my pocket. I would run the dialer and then I would talk off all my own accounts. So while everyone else is getting through maybe 30 accounts in a day, I'm getting through 150, 200 accounts per day. So I'm making more money than the people who are really truly good at negotiating, because I'm playing the numbers game while they're playing the liquidation game, so to speak. But collections really is a number game at the lower levels. At the higher levels, it's a completely different beast. But again, for a future video. Keep in mind that anything I say here that I can't get into a deep dive on, I will touch on in its separate and own unrelated video. So why am I helping people? I'm helping people for two reasons. One, and the obvious, and I guess you could say selfish reason, although I like to not think it's selfish, because I like to really think that I'm benefiting everybody in the process, but I want to build out my network a little bit. I don't have that far of a reach. I'm over on the East Coast. I've got a very limited group of people that I work with, and already since I've started creating this type of media online, I've gotten in contact with people from different states, people who operate in the same industries but different divisions of the same industry, I guess you could say. And it's been very cool. And I really truly believe that someday it's going to pay off, that to have all of these connections. Let's say I have 20, 30, 40 people that I help with their startups. If 3 or 4 of those startups become profitable agencies and those people, trust me implicitly, they can become part of my network, which makes my network stronger, and it's a win-win situation. So that's why I'm making these videos. Plus, there's a lot of very selfish, and I hate to say it, but bad people in the industry. I'm sure any of you know, anyone who searched online how to buy debt, you sort of end up in a funnel, and it becomes a small group of debt brokers that try to drive you to their websites so they can make these $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 debt sales to you, and push all the back end garbage that the actual operating collection agencies don't want to touch, because they are just that. They're garbage. These people don't want to pay, and you're not going to get payments. You're going to lose money on it. You're going to generate complaints. These files are from somebody else's, refusal desk. They're from somebody else's desk of litigants, deceased, bankrupt debtors, things like that. So you really have to be careful when you're trying to buy debt online. As you'll come to learn if you haven't already, your name is all you have in this industry. Trust is going to be your greatest and really your only resource. As far as like networking, coming up with a strong network is very important. And your name is all you have in this industry. So you need to be trustworthy. Otherwise, you're not going to get very far. Now, I have this underlined here. People need to make their own mistakes. I could tell you over and over again, stay away from company A, stay away from company B, stay away from company C. But until you waste your own money buying these garbage portfolios, I think that most people don't really learn the lesson. I like to tell people to try to learn from my mistakes. I've been nearly put out of business purchasing bad debt portfolios online because I was trying to expand away from the very limited network I had back at the beginning. I know I sort of skipped part of my story. I'll finish that in a moment. But I was trying to get out of the network I was in at the beginning because I wanted to create my own network, really. And all that happened was time after time after time after time again, I just kept blowing my money. I would lose $4,000 here, $5,000 there, $3,000 here. And then I went to this one broker this one time. I said, I really need a good purchase. One more bad purchase is literally going to put me out of business. I need debt that's going to perform. I spent $5,000. It was that last $5,000 that I had in my account. At this point, I already had collectors working for me. We didn't collect a single payment off of those accounts. And it tore me up inside. I'm like, I told this guy that he would put me out of business if he sold me a bad portfolio. And he looked me in the eyes, he shook my hand, and he gave me this garbage portfolio. And it really just kind of showed me the true color of a lot of the quote-unquote, brokers in this industry. And it's really sad. Luckily, I'm still here. I've been doing this for almost a decade now. Back, depending on when you want to look at it, 2011 or 2013, I started my own agency. 2008 is when I first got into collections. 2011, I started collecting from home. 2013, I used the money that I saved collecting from home to rent office space and hire collectors. So again, that's my story. And now where I am right now is it's hard to keep track of. There's a lot of turnover in this industry. I want to say 7 or 8 collectors. I've got a pretty nice office. I just bought out my former partner of several years. Partnerships, not very good. If you can stay out of partnerships early on, great. If you need to be in a partnership, stay out of a 50-50 partnership. One of the biggest mistakes of my life was getting into a 50-50 partnership. It was a nightmare to get out of. I'm still dealing with the downsides and the repercussions of it right now. And where do I see myself in the future? I see myself personally being involved with the debt collection industry in one form or another, probably for my entire life and career. But I really like to get more into the software side of things. I don't want to get into the debt broker area. It doesn't really interest me. And again, another video for another day. Being a broker is so much different than being a debt collector. But what I really want to do is I want to create software that helps collection agencies to be more efficient, to liquidate higher, and hopefully someday I can make a living off of just managing debt collection software. Right now, the software that I'm creating, it runs internally within my office, and if you're one of the people in the Slack group, you might be working with some of this software someday. I would really like to replace the debt collection software that my agency is actually using, and I think I'm well on the way to do that. for those of you that have a software engineering background, personally, I'm a Visual C#.net developer, I guess is the best way to be specific about it. C# is my primary language within the .NET framework. I consider myself to be proficient at SQL, specifically MySQL or MariaDB, or Heidi SQL, whatever you want to call that entire stack right there. I guess you could just say MySQL, not so much Microsoft SQL, but that's the stack that I work within. Right now I'm working on a WinForms project. I'll show it to you guys pretty soon. WinForms is a little bit outdated, but I think it's still very important, and I'm about to be expanding into ASP.NET very soon as I finish this current project I'm working on. Now, anyways, all this stuff, the magic numbers, buying debt, we'll get into this stuff in different videos. And in this video, I will touch on payment processing and processing fees. But first, let's just go back to this. So you're in this industry to make money. There's agencies, and then there's clients to the agencies. With the agencies, my agency buys debt, and we service accounts for first-party creditors and third-party debt buyers. We buy debt because there are higher profit margins, significantly higher profit margins when you buy the debt. When you buy the debt, you have full autonomy and control over how you work it. I guess you would say there are some limitations there. When you work newer debt, when you work the 0, the 1, even 2 agency debt, sometimes you have to sort of follow the rules that the creditors outline for you. Some accounts have no resale agreements. Some accounts you have to work highly compliant to the point where it's almost not even worthwhile. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with compliance. Compliance is important. But when the creditors micromanage your collection processes, it becomes almost impossible to keep them happy and to liquidate high enough to be profitable. So again, we'll jump more into that topic in a future video. Another reason for buying debt is the resale. After you work a portfolio, you can sell it to a more aggressive agency. Ideally, you're going to want to shelf it for 6 months to a year before you do that, or you can outsource it to another agency. But when you buy it, it gives you a little bit more control. If you're buying debt, you can also flip portfolios, just buy it and then resell it to other agencies. And when you're doing that, you're leveraging relationships with the creditors or the debt buyers, the brokers, or you're leveraging investment funds. If you have $30,000 to invest, I can tell you right now that my agency seldom has $30,000 to use to purchase debt portfolios. So the people that are higher above me and that regularly have $30,000 to buy $30,000 portfolios, those are the people that place debt with me. And when I take placements, granted, there are lower profit margins, but it's higher quality debt. It boosts the collector morale. It's much easier to collect on. If you only take placements, and keep in mind that when I type this out here, this take placements area, I'm looking at buying debt and taking placements as 2 separate types of agencies. Although a lot of agencies do both. But when I say lower your risk tolerance, or having a lower risk tolerance rather, that is because you're not risking making a bad purchase that could potentially put you out of business, or being overly aggressive on accounts that are too hard to collect on. When you work 0 agency debt, you might only get 30, 32.5%, 35% of what you collect on it as commission. And that's not even including the processing fees that come out. But regardless, you're taking on a much lower risk, because if you buy some 0 agency debt, every time someone refuses to pay it, when that debt is just 2-3 weeks old, maybe 2 months old, what happens is it's like flushing $100 down the toilet. Every person that refuses, that is the cost of that account gone. Nothing you can do about it. It's very stressful. Now, if you're like me, you have an agency with 8, 9, 10 people, and and you've already established a relationship with higher level debt buyers, brokers, and creditors, and they're willing to place the debt with you so you can work it on commission or on contingency, as you'll hear a lot, um, it really does lower your risk, because when someone doesn't pay, you're not losing money. You're only making money when someone does pay. The only money that you're losing when someone doesn't pay is the payroll, the time and energy of working and collecting on that account. Another benefit of taking placements is the whole try before you buy model. Now, granted, a lot of debt on the market, you don't have the option to take it as a placement, to try it out, and then buy it. But if you find a debt broker or a reseller or an agency that has more debt than they can handle, it's very possible that you can take on a placement. If the debt works out, well for you, turns out to be a good fit for your agency, then you can just buy it outright, and then you can sort of get the benefit of both sides, where you lower your risk and you get the higher profit margins, and then you can even resell it afterwards. This right here is a very cool topic. Also goes hand in hand with leasing, but again, another video for another time. This topic of leasing is way too complex to get into for this quick, high level video. So, client to agency. This right here is what, and I hate to say it, I don't want to rain on anyone's parade here, but if you want to be a client to an agency, you're going to need more than $1,000 to do that. There's very few people in this industry who want to start agencies that can't come up with $1,000 to buy a $1,000 portfolio. If you think that you're going to buy a $1,000 portfolio and outsource it to an agency and make passive income that way, I wish you the best of luck. But finding that agency that can't come up with $1,000 on their own, and that is also financially well enough and responsible and trustworthy enough to remit back to you accurately and responsibly without putting you at risk in the process, the odds of those those stars and planets all lining up that way, it's just, you're looking at such a low probability. And I've lost money time and time and time again placing debt out with people who have just blatantly stolen from me. It's very hard to find trustworthy people. It's just a sad truth to this industry. There's a low barrier to entry, which means there's more dishonest people. I'm sorry to say it. I hate to trash on this industry that I'm a part of and that I love so much, but it is a sad truth to this industry, and I can't deny that that's how it is. It sounds easy, but it's a lot more work than people realize. The way that it was sort of explained to me, now there's a very large client that I have. They're one of the largest debt buyers in the U.S., and in my mind, I feel like they've got it made. They've got it so easy. They've got these good relationships. They get this debt. They outsource it. They got a bunch of people that they trust. They handle the inventory management. And to me, it just sounds like they've got the perfect gig set up. They've got investors. I think they're on like a 60 or a 90-day cycle, something that's really short, where their turnover is very quick and they're very profitable. But then somebody else that I know that's also at a very high level around here locally, he told me those guys work hard for their money. He told me that the whole, managing the debt and outsourcing it and finding those trustworthy agencies, not only is it expensive, but it's labor intensive. He basically told me that he thinks that what they do is more stressful than running an agency, and I believe that he knows what he's talking about, because he's on both sides of it. He takes the placements and he buys debt direct from lenders to outsource with people like me. He's got probably a 40-man agency. I know it's been up to 70 people at a time. Anyways, if you're going to buy debt to outsource, it's highly reliant on relationships and trust. you're going to be making money off of one of two things. Either you have more money to play with and leverage than the typical small collection agency does, or you have better relationships with high-level lenders or clients, or debt buyers, brokers, or first-party lenders. Those are always the best relationships when you can lock them down. As far as using this method of placing with agencies for passive income, it's possible. It's not easy. That's all I can say. It's not easy. Maybe you'll have better luck than I have, but time and time again, I see people getting into this industry thinking they can just purchase a $1,000 or $2,000 portfolio and then outsource it. People ask if they can place the debt with me. I'm sorry if you're one of those people who's asked me that. I'm sure I've already explained this several times over. But my agency has more debt than we can possibly work. I'm constantly looking for agencies to outsource to. I can buy $5,000 portfolios weekly, and that's sort of the level that my agency is at right now, where we spend maybe $20,000 a month on purchasing debt. So if you can't maybe exponentially or maybe at least 3 times over multiply those investments and have it be profitable for both of us, it just doesn't make sense for me to take a placement from you. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not somebody else who's collecting from home and doesn't have the staff or the employees and also doesn't have that $2,000 to buy their first small portfolio. It doesn't mean you can't make money placing to them. But again, another video for another time. It's just way too large of a topic to get into for this quick overview. Starting a home-based agency, the reasons for this is it could be a proof of concept for a larger agency. And there's a little bit of overlap with these right here. So I'll just kind of jump into this. Keep in mind, I threw this together quick to be a quick overview. I wasn't anticipating on going into a deep dive on all of these topics. But as far as risk goes, you can still keep a full-time job and see if it works out for you before you go, quote-unquote, all in. So it really limits and lowers the risk in that, from that perspective. You could start with a small amount of money. We'll say under $3,000 is pretty reasonable. Probably even less depending on, the more you spend, the more you're going to make. A lot of times you get what you pay for in this industry. Sometimes you get something way better than what you pay for, and sometimes you get something way worse than what you pay for. But I think $3,000 is sort of that sweet spot with how much money does it take to start a home-based agency. We're going to be right around $3,000, unless you're only taking placements, in which case it's going to be a little bit lower. Getting to learn the industry before you expose yourself to it entirely, that's going to be very important. There's going to be mistakes that you make. You're going to have expectations that are going to turn out to be, incorrect or inaccurate. Make those mistakes on a small scale before you actually open a full agency and start hiring people. Trust me, it can be disastrous. If you make certain mistakes while you have a 10-person staff, there's going to be a couple people losing their jobs, people whose livelihood depends on you. Anyways, on the financial side of things, meaning if you don't have that startup, the seed money, you want to start a placement agency and just service accounts, that's very cheap. All you really need is a PC, a server. Now, the server, again, and anything that's bolded here is going to have an entirely separate video of its own. You need a server. You need collection software. These two sort of go hand in hand. You're going to need payment processing, and you're going to need skip tracing. And now these two also sort of go hand in hand because you can also use a third-party agency to assist you with these two, the payment processing and the skip tracing. But really what you need is you need a PC, you need a server, you need collection software. A third-party agency, besides providing you with payment processing, skip tracing, they can also provide you a lot of times with collection software and a server. So a PC might be all you need to get started if you have the right connections. And if you're not already a member of my Slack group, feel free to either comment on this video or reach out to me via email. My email is on my YouTube information page, and I'll send anyone an invitation to the Slack group who wants it, as long as you're not a debt broker, because I don't want people in there peddling debt. But just let me know. I'm happy to help anybody out that wants to get into this industry and take it seriously. If you have some questions, you might be considering it. Maybe the group isn't a great spot for you. Maybe you just want to ask me a few questions on email. That's fine. I'll respond to you. Just understand that I'm busy. I might not get back to you right away. I run an agency. I'm helping a handful of people with startups. I've got some real estate stuff going on. I'm working on software. I have very little free time these days. And again, I want to apologize to everyone in the Slack group. I know I've been distant this week, to say the least. This week has been out of control, to put it lightly. Anyways, another reason for starting a home-based agency is going to be, and I put modest, I think I have it italicized and bolded here. Modest self-employment. There's extremely low overhead, and you can net $50,000 per year. I said fairly easily in quotes. It really depends a lot on, there's so many factors at play there, but a big part of it is going to be your ambition, your willingness to learn and adapt, your ability to focus and persevere. Anyways, I just threw this little tidbit in there. I Google searched it before before I started recording this video. The average income in America, and there's a few different answers to this, but I got this one right from Google. It says the 2017 nominal median income per capita was $31,786. The mean income per capita was $48,150. The Census Bureau reports that the current population survey, the PINC-01, real median household income was around $61,372. Okay, so that's the median household income. So that would be, spouses. Okay, so with the median income being between these levels here, if you can do that and do that fairly easily, collecting from home, I understand why that's appealing. But there's also, if you're collecting from home, you're going to have some hurdles that an actual, funded startup is not going to have to deal with. And again, I hate to keep saying this, but another video for another day. Another topic that's too large for this video. But it's going to be pretty easy to bring in, around $1,000 a week if you're collecting. There's a little bit of a formatting issue here. Okay, I knew that sounded weird. You can make around $1,000 a week, and might be collecting around $2,000 a week gross. So you might be collecting around $8,000 a month, pocketing $4,000 a month. You're making a decent income at that point. It appears to be above the average mean income in America. What does it say? 20. I don't know how accurate or recent this. Oh, right there. Okay, March 27th, 2019. Yeah, so it is pretty recent. I understand the allure to that. I also understand that a lot of people have this incorrect idea that it's going to be a lot easier than it actually is. So try to manage your expectations and understand that money isn't going to come easy. You do have to work for it. And now what I think to be the most common or the most popular reason, and this is the path that I took, is to save seed money for a full agency, to fund a full agency. In the process, you build infrastructure, you build residuals, which is going to be your post dates. There's this expression, post dates pay the bills. So when people set up payment plan arrangements and they're paying $50 or $100 a month for the next 12 or 24 months, that money, when it builds up over time and you have enough of those people making enough of those payment plans, you're going to come into the month eventually and you're going to have $15, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 pending before you even make a single phone call in the month. It makes it much easier to start an agency up, hire people, and start taking a little bit of risks on your end. And then it also helps you to build equity. Every debt portfolio you purchase is going to build equity in your company. Just as those residuals, equate to money, so does the debt portfolio, or so do the debt portfolios that you purchase. Those equate to money. Either way, you're building equity. The software that you have on your computer, the knowledge that you gain while you're doing this, while you're collecting from home, all of this is creating an entity. You're building a collection agency, even if it's just you with a headset and a laptop and some cheap collection software with some out-of-stat debt that you're calling on. You're building equity in your company anytime you're moving forward. Now, another important thing I wanted to at least touch on in this video is payment processing. Right now in the US, and this really sucks, there's a catch-22 here. I know this is going to probably upset or bother a lot of you. I understand it. I've been through it a million times. It's very, very aggravating and frustrating. It's a catch-22. It doesn't make any sense, but the high-risk payment processing model is very difficult, and you're going to have to deal with it. There's only two real processors. By processors, I mean acquirers, or they may be called ISOs. And those are going to be Esquire Bank and Synovus Bank. Now, keep in mind that Esquire Bank was originally, as far as I understand, they were created to be like an escrow account for attorneys and law firms to use. And apparently, at some point, they got involved with the debt collection industry, and they got involved with processing for the collection industry, which in turn becomes high-risk payment processing. So Esquire and Synovus Bank, they have direct relationships with Visa, MasterCard, Discover, American Express, and then some of the world-leading banks like Wells Fargo, Citigroup, Citibank, whatever you want to call it. Like some of these very large banks are going to have direct relationships with the card issuers, just as the acquirers / ISOs or interchanges are going to have with the issuers. So that's sort of the glue that holds that together. Now, as you apply for payment processing, you're going to be dealing with a reseller or an agent, and that's going to be essentially whoever's affiliate link you click on. Now, I use Pathways Payments as an example here, and the reason I mention Pathways is because Pathways has a high-risk portfolio. What I mean by that is they're more willing to deal with debt collection agency startups, because instead of giving each startup their own payment processor, I think they've got a group of like 20 agencies that they could fit into this one portfolio, where all 20 agencies sort of share the same processor, for lack of a better term, and then Pathways will sort of patch the money out to which agency it goes to, at the end of each remit cycle, which might be 3 or 4 days, it might be a week. But it's sort of a cool idea that they came up with to help startup agencies get processing. The only issue with that is they don't really want to fund people who are collecting from home. And if they know that that's how you're working, you're going to have trouble getting approved with them. But if you can apply with them and at least build up a relationship so they know who you are and they have you in their database, once you do have some processing records, on file, then you might want to revisit them and get approved for them. Also, keep in mind that even though you're going to be using an affiliate link when you go through any processor at all, it doesn't change how much you're going to pay for processing. Now, let me explain what I mean by that, because the first thing that you need to get over when you think about payment processing is the processing fees. Forget about the processing fees. They're going to be inconvenient. They're going to be high. They're going to suck. But the thing is, once you've been in business for 6 months to a year, that's when you have a little bit of leverage to negotiate that. When you go 6 months without exceeding that 1% hypothetical chargeback limit, you now have all the power in your hands to renegotiate your contract with the processors. Because at that point, they want your business. But when you get started, that the difference of 0.005% or 0.01%, it's not going to make much of a difference for you. What you need is you just need a processor that is going to get the money to you. Even if you're only getting 80% of what you process at the end of the day, before you remit the money back to the client, if you're taking payments, at least you're getting that money. And you have to build up the bank statements and then show the processors that you're operating a legitimate business before they're going to take you seriously. And that is the catch-22 of this industry, and it sucks, and I'm so sorry that it's like that, guys, but that's how it is, and I'm dealing with it right now, too. This past week, a reason it's been so busy for me, I had a partner for years, and when him and I split up, I'm the one that initiated the split. I wanted to go in a more compliant direction. I wanted to scale larger. My former partner and myself just didn't have the same idea of what to do. We didn't see ourselves on the same paths. So when I bought him out, part of the arrangement was that I had to let him keep using one of our payment processors until he got his own. Now, it's been quite a while already. It's been like 4 months since we split, and he's still been using my processor. And actually, I'm pretty sure he just got his own processor, but in the process of getting his own processor, he got 2 of my backup processors shut down with high chargeback rates. And this past week, he just got a chargeback for $1,700, which means that $1,700 was just ripped out of my bank account and given back to a debtor who, I don't even want to get into it. My blood's boiling just thinking about this right now. Anyways, needless to say, it's been a stressful and busy week for me, so I'm really looking forward to just going downstairs, coding for an hour or two, and then maybe play some video games and relax for a little bit before I have to go to sleep and start all over again. It's like when they mention mailmen going postal because the mail never stops. I'm sure any of you entrepreneurs know the feeling. Anyways, now on the website, so let's say you said, well, I don't want to pay an affiliate, so I'm just going to go to Pathway's website and apply through them. You'll notice that they don't really have a box that says apply here. What they do is they have articles on their website, and then at the bottom of the articles, there's going to be enter your name and information here, and a salesperson will reach out to you. What they do is they have content creators write articles that they then host on their website, and then whichever article brings you over to their website and generates the sales lead for them is going to be the affiliate, so to speak. Even if it's on the front page of their website, it's whoever created that information, whoever created that media for you to consume, whoever brought you to that website is who's going to be the affiliate. And that way, the processors or the resellers or the agents, whatever you want to call them, they sort of offload the work of having to find the leads, and they outsource it to independent contractors. With that being said, I have an affiliate link for Pathways, so if you want to use that, I'll put it down in the, the description of the video. You by no means have to use my affiliate link. Just know that any link that you do use, even directly on a website, is going to be somebody's affiliate link. So if you found me helpful, maybe you want to try that. I've yet to have anybody apply and be approved under any affiliate link I've ever used for anything in my life, so that would be pretty cool. Anyways, now the processor itself, and please keep in mind, this gets very convoluted and very complicated because you're going to be dealing with resellers that are going to be referring to themselves as processors. You're going to be dealing with agents who are going to refer to the processors as gateways and the gateways as processors. You're going to be dealing with processors that will refer to the banks as the ISOs or the issuers as the banks. I mean, the language is so convoluted. It is outrageous, and it's so hard to understand what everything means. But all you realize and all you need to know at the end of the day is that there's going to be 4 or 5 people involved in getting paid. out of your processing fees. So can you really cut any of them out? You can't cut the gateway out because you can't process payments with a virtual terminal. You can't have a virtual terminal to type in credit card information if you don't have a gateway. You can't process through your software if you don't have an API key through your gateway. A processor isn't going to work with you if you don't work with an agent or an affiliate of theirs, because the processors don't want to deal with the what's it called, the sales leads, just as the processing banks don't want to deal with having to sell the accounts to you. The processing banks are more interested in the underwriting and the distribution of the funds. So the processor and the gateway sort of go hand in hand, because the reseller or the agent will hook you up with both of these. And then once you get approved for the processing bank and you have access to 3 separate websites or 4 separate websites, depending on whether the reseller or agent provides you with like a portal to view your progress in or to load up documentation through, which is uncommon, but I've seen it happen before. You're now going to have login credentials for 3 or 4 separate websites. And out of those 3 or 4 separate websites, you have no direct contact with the acquirer, ISO, or the issuer directly. If you try going to the acquirer or the issuer directly, you won't get anywhere. This whole thing is just so absurd and so outrageous, and that's why I'm really rooting for cryptocurrency to take over. I really hope it does change the world. We'll see. But for now, it's a clunky, outdated system. There's too many hands in the pot. Too many cooks in the kitchen. It's very frustrating, but I'll help guide you guys the best I can to get through it. It's a really bad process. As far as processing goes, there's 2 types of processors. There's going to be the regular processors, and even within the regular processors, there's 2 subgroups. There's going to be manually keyed, which is when you type in the card number or when somebody types their card number in on your website. And there's going to be when somebody swipes a card. That will be the low risk processing if it's something like retail, or if it's a recurring service, but not recurring in the sense of a payment plan, but more along the lines of a maybe like a Loot Crate, a subscription box, or a Quip toothbrush heads. Those are going to be the types of businesses that get the regular processing with the low fees. Dealing with high risk, which is going to be the collections industry, the adult industry, gambling, cryptocurrency, firearms manufacturing, ammunition manufacturing, and I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other things I'm leaving out of there. You're going to be dealing with more like 5%, and that doesn't include a 10% reserve that they're going to hold on to. Some places it will be a rolling reserve, and they'll give it back to you after 90 days or 6 months under a 1% chargeback rate. Some places will keep it the entire time that you are processing with them. It's just a sad fact and a sad requirement of the industry. And if you are piggybacking off of another agency's processor, you're not going to be able to get those funds back from the reserve, because now the agency is acting as the gateway and the processor. They're taking on all of the risk. And I personally had this one guy whose name I'm not going to mention here because it's not that unusual to think that he might end up seeing this video at some point, or not that outrageous to think that might happen. But this one guy used me as a processor. I don't want to admit to violating the terms of service with a payment processor, but he was essentially working for me. He was collecting from home. I provided him with the tools he needed to collect from home, and he was making money for both of us. Now, this little word that I will not say here, but I would love to just crush this guy, crush his head under a car tire or something, if I was a violent person. He got his own processor one day, a low-risk processor, and what he did was he went into my gateway. He refunded all of the payments that he made and reprocessed them through his gateway. stole about $5,000 from me before I could even realize what happened, and then disappeared. And now my former partner is currently partnered with this guy. So, again, I'm not going to get into that. I don't want to stress myself out too bad today. It's a Sunday, and I want to try to relax after all this is over. But just understand that a reserve is a sad fact and a sad requirement of the industry. Also, Operation Choke Point. We're going to do an entire video about Operation Choke Point. It's not really relevant today, but it's important to understand how the industry got to be the way it is. If you want to see a really good video, I'll also link to it below. It's going to be Sean Duffy. He is either a congressman or a senator. I think he's a senator. Tearing apart Richard Cordray, who was the head of the CFPB. So I'm going to post a link to this video down below. If you haven't already, maybe check it out. It's going to be very, very interesting. And I just sort of messed up my formatting here. Anyways, yeah, it's definitely just like one of those things that you want to know about and understand if you're going to be in this business. The gateway is going to charge you 1% plus a flat fee for each transaction. And then originally you're going to probably net 82 or 83% of what you collect on owned debt for the first 6 months to a year. After that, you can get yourself up to 92, 93%. After that 1 year, keeping it under a 1% chargeback rate. Just don't get too disappointed. There is hope. There is some industry reform. Things are changing a little bit. There are some ways to work around, I don't want to say like loopholes, but there are ways to work around some of the more frustrating parts of this industry. And then you can always reapply after you're established. 6 months to a year after you're established with your payment processor, you know, you can have the account go through underwriting again, and maybe they'll agree to release your reserve for you. Or maybe they'll agree to let you reapply and potentially get a lower rate this next time around, or have a rolling reserve instead of a permanent reserve. So that's it for this video. If you guys have any questions about anything I mentioned here, please leave them in the comments below. If you're not already in the Slack group, reach out to me and I will get you an invite to the Slack group. If you have any if you have any questions about anything that is not highlighted on here, or if you have any ideas that you want to recommend for future videos, and for example, you see that I want to make a video about the buying debt, resale, and leveraging relationships aspect, but you don't care about that so much, but you really, really want to learn about leasing debt, or you really, really want to learn about the servers and collection software, you know, let me know, because essentially these videos are going to be created based on what information you guys want to learn about. So consider this a quick overview, and I will make this document publicly available. I'm just going to look through it real quick and make sure it doesn't have any bad information on it or anything that I need to clarify before doing that. And I will talk to some of you guys very shortly in our weekly Google Hangouts call. So I wish you all the best of luck. If you're not already in the group, I look forward to getting to know you, and we will talk shortly.